She sheltered Single-Dad Mafia for one night. Next morning, his 500 men patrolled her entire street. The thunder crashed like broken glass against Maya's apartment windows, each lightning flash turning her cozy living room into a scene from a horror movie. She'd been curled up with her tea and a book when the pounding started, not the gentle tap of rain, but the desperate hammering of human fists against her door. Thud. 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 Maya froze, her ceramic mug halfway to her lips. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday. Who could possibly be at her door at this hour? The storm had been raging for 2 hours, turning the quiet suburban street into a river of rushing water. Even the street lights flickered weakly through the downpour. The knocking came again, more urgent this time, followed by something that made her heart skip, a child's muffled cry. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay put, Maya set down her tea and padded barefoot to the door. Through the peephole, she could barely make out 2 figures huddled against her doorframe. The taller one was hunched over, shielding someone, smaller beneath a dark jacket. "Please!" came a deep voice, rough with exhaustion and desperation. "My son! He's cold. Just until the storm passes." Maya's hand hovered over the deadbolt. She'd lived in this neighborhood for 3 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. The sensible part of her mind catalogued all the reasons to keep the door locked: stranger danger, the late hour, the storm providing perfect cover for anyone with ill intentions. But then she heard it again, a small, frightened whimper that cut straight through her defenses. "Daddy, I'm scared," came the tiny voice, barely audible through the door. Maya's resolve crumbled. She was a kindergarten teacher. She'd spent her career protecting children. She couldn't leave a kid out there in this weather, no matter how suspicious the circumstances. Her fingers moved to the locks before she could change her mind. The door swung open, and the storm immediately tried to barge in, sending sheets of rain across her hardwood floor. The man standing there was not what she'd expected. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair plastered to his skull and clothes that clung to a frame that spoke of serious gym time. But it was his face that made her breath catch. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes. God, those eyes! They were the color of storm clouds, gray-blue and intense, scanning her apartment behind her with the quick, calculating gaze of someone accustomed to assessing threats. And in his arms, wrapped in what looked like an expensive leather jacket far too big for him, was a boy who couldn't be more than 6 years old. The child's face was pale and drawn, his dark hair a miniature version of his father's, his small body shivering despite the jacket's protection. "Thank you," the man said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't quite place, something European, maybe Italian. "We won't be any trouble." Maya stepped back, gesturing them inside. "Of course. Come in, both of you. You're soaked." The moment they crossed the threshold, she noticed things that made her stomach tighten with unease. The man moved with a predator's grace, his eyes never stopping their constant surveillance of her apartment. When he set his son down, Maya caught sight of something that made her blood run cold, a jagged scar running from his left ear down to his collar, disappearing beneath his soaked shirt. But it was the way he positioned himself that truly alarmed her. He placed his body between her and his son, one hand resting on what looked suspiciously like a bulge beneath his jacket. Even dripping wet and apparently grateful, he radiated the kind of controlled danger that made small animals run for cover. "I'm Maya," she offered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Let me get you both some towels." "Marco," he replied after a pause that lasted a beat too long. "And this is Tommy." The little boy peeked around his father's legs, offering Maya a shy smile that melted her heart despite her growing apprehension. He was beautiful, with enormous dark eyes and his father's strong features softened by childhood innocence. "Hi, Tommy," Maya said, crouching down to his level. "Are you hungry? I think I have some hot chocolate." Tommy's eyes lit up, but he looked to his father for permission before nodding eagerly. As Maya bustled around her kitchen, heating milk and pulling out extra blankets, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. Marco had accepted her hospitality with the wary gratitude of someone unaccustomed to kindness from strangers. He kept Tommy close, his attention divided between his son and the windows, as if expecting someone, or something, to appear in the storm. "You're not from around here," Maya observed, handing Tommy a steaming mug topped with marshmallows. "No," Marco replied simply, accepting his own cup but not drinking from it. "We were traveling." The word hung in the air like a question mark. Traveling at midnight in a storm with a 6-year-old? Maya bit back her questions, focusing instead on making Tommy comfortable. She found a spare pair of her nephew's pajamas, left over from his last visit, and some thick socks. "Why don't you get changed into something dry, sweetheart?" she suggested to Tommy. "The bathroom's just down the hall." As Tommy scampered off with his new clothes, Maya found herself alone with Marco for the first time. The man seemed to fill her small living room, his presence both magnetic and menacing. He'd shed his jacket, revealing a black sweater that clung to muscles that definitely came from more than casual workouts. "Thank you," he said again, and this time there was something raw in his voice. "For helping him." "You didn't have to." "Of course I did," Maya replied automatically. "He's just a baby." Something flickered across Marco's features, pain, maybe, or guilt. "Yes. He is." When Tommy emerged from the bathroom, swimming in the oversized pajamas but grinning from ear to ear, Maya felt her heart constrict. Whatever Marco was running from, whatever danger had driven them into the storm, this child was innocent in all of it. She made up the couch for them, bringing extra pillows and blankets. Tommy curled up like a tired puppy, his eyelids already drooping from exhaustion and warmth. Marco sat beside him, one large hand resting protectively on his son's back. "I'll be right here if you need anything," Maya said softly. "The storm should pass by morning." She was turning to leave when Marco's voice stopped her. "Maya." She turned back to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. For a moment, the dangerous stranger disappeared, replaced by something far more human, a father grateful beyond words for someone showing kindness to his child. "Thank you," he whispered. "You have no idea what this means." Back in her bedroom, Maya lay awake listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet murmurs of Marco's voice as he whispered something in what sounded like Italian to his sleeping son. She tried to convince herself that her unease was just paranoia, that Marco was simply a single father who'd gotten caught in bad weather. But sleep wouldn't come. Around 2 a.m., she crept to the kitchen for water and froze. Marco's leather jacket hung over a chair, and from its depths, she could see the unmistakable outline of a gun holster. Her breath caught as she noticed something else, the corner of what looked like a passport, and beneath it, the glint of steel. A knife. Her hands trembled as she backed away, her mind racing. Who was this man she'd let into her home? What kind of single father traveled armed in the middle of the night? And those scars, they weren't from any accident. As if sensing her presence, Marco's voice drifted from the living room, speaking in rapid, hushed Italian into what must have been a phone. The words were foreign, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, commanding, dangerous. Maya retreated to her bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd made a terrible mistake. Every instinct she'd ignored at the door was screaming now, but it was too late. Marco and Tommy were in her living room, and she had no idea what morning would bring. Outside, the storm began to weaken, but inside Maya's apartment, she had the sinking feeling that a far more dangerous tempest was just beginning. As dawn approached, she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that her quiet suburban street would never be the same again. Unaware that by sunrise her world would be turned completely upside down by the revelation of exactly who she had sheltered from the storm. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the sound of Marco's voice, no longer speaking Italian, but murmuring something in English that chilled her to the bone. "Yes, we're safe. But tomorrow, everything changes. Make sure the street is secured by dawn." Maya woke to silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a suburban morning, but something else entirely, a heavy, unnatural stillness that made her skin crawl. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. She glanced at her clock, 7:23 a.m. Pale sunlight filtered through her curtains, and for a moment she almost convinced herself that last night had been a vivid dream. But then she heard it, Tommy's giggle from the kitchen, followed by the deep rumble of Marco's voice. "Remember what I told you about staying close to Papa today, okay?" Maya slipped on her robe and padded toward the kitchen, expecting to find them preparing to leave. What she found instead was Marco standing at her window, his entire body rigid with tension. He wasn't looking at her small backyard garden anymore. He was staring at something that had drained all color from his face. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, moving to stand beside him. Then she saw it. Her quiet, tree-lined street, the same street where Mrs. Henderson walked her poodle every morning and where the Johnson kids rode their bikes in circles, had been transformed overnight into something from a military operation. Black SUVs lined both sides of the street like silent sentinels. Men in dark suits stood at strategic positions, by the mailboxes, near the stop sign, at the corner where Maple Street intersected with Oak. They weren't trying to hide. They were making a statement. "Marco," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "What is this?" Before he could answer, Tommy came running over, clutching a piece of toast. "Papa, look! All those cars came to see us!" Maya's blood turned to ice. The child spoke as if this was normal, as if waking up to find their street occupied by armed men was just another Tuesday morning. A knock came at the door, not the desperate pounding of last night, but 3 sharp, respectful raps. Marco's jaw tightened, and Maya watched in growing horror as he reached beneath his sweater and pulled out a gun. Not to threaten, but to check it before tucking it back into his waistband. "Stay with Tommy," he ordered Maya, his voice completely different now, cold, authoritative, commanding. Maya grabbed Tommy's hand, pulling him behind the kitchen counter as Marco approached the door. Through the peephole, she could see a man in an expensive suit, his hands visible and empty, waiting with the patience of someone accustomed to being kept waiting. Marco opened the door, and what happened next shattered every assumption Maya had made about the quiet stranger she'd helped. The man in the suit, easily 6'4" and built like a bodyguard, took one look at Marco and dropped to one knee right there on Maya's doorstep. "Don Rossetti," the man said, his voice thick with respect and something that sounded dangerously close to fear. "We secured the perimeter as you requested. The entire street is under our protection, Don Rossetti." Maya felt the world tilt sideways. She'd heard that name whispered in news reports, seen it in newspaper headlines that spoke of organized crime and federal investigations. Vincent Marco Rossetti, one of the most powerful mafia leaders on the East Coast, a man whose name made FBI agents lose sleep and rival families plot in shadows. And she had given him hot chocolate and let him sleep on her couch. More men appeared behind the first, a small army of soldiers all showing the same deference to the man Maya had known as a desperate father just hours ago. They spoke in rapid Italian, their words punctuated by, "Yes, Don," and, "Of course, Don," and, "It will be done immediately, Don." Marco, no, Vincent Rossetti, listened to their reports with the calm authority of a man who had never doubted his own power. When they spoke of neutralizing threats and expanding the protection detail, Maya felt her knees go weak. "Papa?" Tommy had wandered over, completely oblivious to the transformation taking place around him. "Are we going home now?" Vincent's entire demeanor changed the moment his son spoke. The cold mafia don disappeared, replaced by the loving father Maya had glimpsed the night before. He scooped Tommy into his arms, pressing a kiss to the boy's forehead. "Not yet, Bambino. Papa has some work to do first." But as he held his son, his eyes found Maya's across the room. Gone was any pretense of being just another single father. She was looking at a man who commanded an empire built on violence and loyalty, a man whose word could mean life or death for hundreds of people. "We need to talk," he said to Maya, his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. The soldiers began to disperse, but Maya noticed they didn't leave. They simply repositioned themselves, some in the SUVs, others walking patrol routes that covered every angle of her property. Her quiet street had become a fortress, and she was trapped at its center. As Vincent Rossetti closed the door and turned to face her, Maya realized with crystalline clarity that her life had just changed forever. The storm had passed, but the man she'd sheltered had brought something far more dangerous than rain into her world. He had brought his empire to her doorstep. And now, whether she liked it or not, she was part of it. 3 days. That's how long it took for Maya's world to completely unravel. The first sign came Tuesday morning when she left for work. Mrs. Henderson, who had walked her poodle past Maya's house every day for 2 years, crossed to the other side of the street when she saw her. The elderly woman's eyes were wide with fear, and she clutched her purse like Maya might snatch it from her hands. By Wednesday, the whispers had started. Maya could hear them in the grocery store checkout line, see the pointing fingers and concerned glances. The suburban neighborhood gossip network had kicked into overdrive, and she was at the center of every conversation. "I heard she's his mistress," came a hushed voice from the cereal aisle. "No way. My husband thinks she's some kind of informant. You know, working with the FBI. Are you crazy? Look at all those cars. She's obviously in deep with them. Probably laundering money or something." Maya gripped her shopping cart tighter, trying to ignore the stares that followed her through the store. She had become a pariah overnight, transformed from the friendly kindergarten teacher everyone liked into the dangerous woman who had brought organized crime to their quiet street. The black SUVs hadn't moved. If anything, there were more of them now. Vincent, she couldn't think of him as Marco anymore, had tried to explain. Tommy needed protection, he'd said. There had been threats. By helping them that night, she had inadvertently placed herself in the crossfire of a war she didn't understand. "I never asked for this," she had told him that first morning, watching his soldiers patrol her front yard like it was their personal territory. "No," he had agreed, his storm-gray eyes serious. "But you have it now. And I protect what's mine." What's mine? The words had sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way he looked at her when he said them. The phone calls started on Thursday. The first one came at 3 a.m., jolting Maya from restless sleep. Heavy breathing on the other end, then a voice rough with cigarettes and malice. "We know where you work, teacher. Pretty little school with all those pretty little children." Maya's blood turned to ice. She hung up, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. It rang again immediately. "You think Rossetti can protect you forever? Think again, sweetheart. We're watching. Always watching." She didn't sleep after that. Friday brought flowers, beautiful red roses delivered to her classroom during story time. The children had been excited, asking if Maya had a boyfriend. She'd forced a smile, playing along until she read the card tucked between the thorns. "For the Don's whore. Enjoy them while you can. The Columbos." Maya had excused herself, rushing to the bathroom to throw up while 26 kindergartners wondered where their teacher had gone. She called Vincent with trembling fingers, reading him the message in a whisper. The silence on the other end was more terrifying than any threat. "Pack a bag," he said finally, his voice deadly calm. "Now. My men will escort you home. I'm not going anywhere with Maya." The way he said her name stopped her cold. "The Columbos don't make empty threats. If they know where you work, they know your schedule, your route home, where you buy groceries. They know everything." The drive home was surreal. 2 black cars flanked her modest Honda, making her feel like the president's motorcade if the president taught finger painting and red-green eggs and ham for a living. Neighbors peeked through curtains as the convoy pulled into her driveway, adding fuel to the gossip fire that was already consuming her reputation. Vincent was waiting in her living room, Tommy coloring quietly at her kitchen table. The sight of the little boy, so innocent and unaware of the deadly game swirling around him, broke something in Maya's chest. "The Columbos are old enemies," Vincent explained without preamble. "They've been looking for a way to hurt me for months. Now they think they've found it." "Me," Maya said flatly. "You," his eyes were hard, but she caught something else there, regret maybe. Or guilt. They think you're important to me. Am I? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Vincent studied her for a long moment, and Maya felt her breath catch. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. That's the problem. You're starting to be. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Maya felt her world shift again, but this time it wasn't fear driving the change, it was something far more dangerous. Outside, a car backfired, and both Vincent and Maya flinched. But it wasn't a car, Maya realized with growing horror. It was a gunshot. The Shadow War had found her quiet street, and she was about to learn just how far Vincent Rossetti would go to protect what he considered his. Get away from the windows! Vincent's voice cut through Maya's shock like a blade. In one fluid motion, he scooped Tommy from his chair and pushed both him and Maya toward the back of the house, away from the street-facing rooms. Papa, what's happening? Tommy's voice was small and scared. Just a game, Bambino. We're playing hide and seek. But Maya could see the truth in Vincent's face, the hard lines around his eyes, the way his free hand instinctively moved toward his weapon. This wasn't a game. This was war. The gunshot had been a warning. A message. We know where you live. I want out, Maya said the moment Vincent had settled Tommy in her bedroom with his tablet and headphones. Her voice was steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. This ends now. Take your men, take your war, and get away from my life. Vincent turned from where he'd been speaking rapidly into his phone, coordinating with his soldiers outside. His expression was unreadable, but Maya caught something that might have been pain flickering behind his eyes. You think I want this for you? He asked quietly. You think I wanted to drag an innocent woman into my world? Then let me go. Maya stepped closer, desperation making her bold. I won't say anything. I'll move if I have to. I just want my life back. Vincent was silent for so long that Maya thought he might actually agree. Then he pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph that made her blood freeze. It was her. Walking out of the elementary school where she worked, her arms full of art supplies, completely unaware that someone had been watching. Waiting. This was taken yesterday, Vincent said, his voice deadly quiet. 2 hours before you found those flowers in your classroom. Maya's hands shook as she stared at the image. She looked so normal, so oblivious to the danger circling her life like sharks in dark water. There are more, Vincent continued, swiping to the next photo. Maya at the grocery store. Maya at the gas station. Maya jogging through the park she'd thought was safe and peaceful. 47 pictures, taken over the last 3 days. They know your routine better than you do. Maya sank into her kitchen chair, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her. But I'm nobody. I'm just a teacher. Why would they? Because of that night. Vincent pulled out another chair and sat across from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dangerous. The night you opened your door to a stranger in a storm. The night you saved my son's life. I gave you shelter for a few hours. That's not... Tommy was dying, Maya. The words hit her like a physical blow. Vincent's composure cracked slightly, and she saw the haunted father beneath the mafia don. He has a rare blood disorder. Needs medication every 12 hours or he goes into shock. That night, we were running from an ambush. 3 cars full of Colombo soldiers, hunting us like animals. Tommy's medicine was in our car when they forced us off the road. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God. We'd been walking for hours. Tommy was getting weaker, starting to have episodes. I knew we had maybe 30 minutes before. Vincent's voice broke slightly. Before I lost him. Then I saw your light. Maya remembered that night differently now, not a desperate father seeking shelter from a storm, but a man watching his child slip away, willing to risk everything on the kindness of a stranger. You saved his life, Vincent continued. And in my world, that creates a debt that can never be repaid. It also makes you family. And family. Family is everything. But that means... It means the Colombos see you as my weakness now. They think hurting you will hurt me. Vincent's gray eyes met hers, and Maya saw the truth he wasn't saying out loud. They would be right. Leaving you unprotected would be signing your death warrant. Maya felt the walls of her normal life crumbling around her. So what? I'm your prisoner now. You're under my protection. There's a difference. Is there? Maya's voice cracked with frustration and fear. I can't go to work without a convoy. My neighbors think I'm a criminal. I can't even buy groceries without armed guards. How is this protection? This is a prison with better security. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. What would you prefer? Your freedom or your life? The question hung in the air between them, stark and unforgiving. Before Maya could answer, Vincent's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, and his entire body went rigid. What is it? Maya asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Vincent turned the phone toward her. The message was short and to the point. The teacher's school. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. Come alone or we start with the children. Maya felt the world tilt sideways. Her students. Her babies. 26 innocent children who had nothing to do with this nightmare she'd stumbled into. Now do you understand? Vincent asked quietly. There is no walking away, Maya. Not anymore. The only way out of this is through it. As if to punctuate his words, another gunshot echoed from the street, closer this time, more deliberate. The war had truly begun. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat in her kitchen, watching Vincent coordinate his army through a series of hushed phone calls while Tommy slept peacefully in her guest room, blissfully unaware that his father was planning a war to keep him safe. The school will be evacuated by noon, Vincent said, hanging up his latest call. I have contacts in the district office. Gas leak emergency. Building closed for the weekend. Maya nodded numbly. Her students would be safe, but the cost of that safety was becoming clearer by the hour. This wasn't just about her anymore. Vincent's world was expanding to swallow everything she cared about. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Vincent looked up from the tactical map he'd spread across her dining room table, her quiet neighborhood transformed into a battlefield of red pins and strategic positions. Yes, I do. The Columbos made it personal when they threatened children. There was something in his voice that made Maya study his face more carefully. Beneath the cold calculation of a mafia don, she glimpsed something raw and desperate. This wasn't just about protecting her or maintaining his reputation. This was personal in a way that went deeper than gang politics. Tommy almost died once before, Vincent said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Not from his condition. From them. Maya felt her breath catch. What happened? Vincent's hands stilled on the map, his fingers tracing the outline of her street like he was memorizing every detail. 6 months ago. They took him from his school. Held him for 3 days. The words fell into the silence between them like stones into dark water. Oh God, Vincent. They wanted me to give up territory in Brooklyn. Said they'd send him back piece by piece if I refused. Vincent's voice was steady, but Maya could see the tremor in his hands. I found them first. But those 3 days. Tommy still has nightmares. Maya understood now why Vincent had been so desperate that stormy night. Why he'd risked everything to trust a stranger. He wasn't just protecting his son's life, he was protecting what was left of Tommy's innocence. That's why you were running that night, she realized. It was happening again. Vincent nodded. They'd found our safe house. We barely got out before they surrounded us. If you hadn't opened your door. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. A crash from outside shattered the moment. Maya jumped to her feet, but Vincent was already moving, his gun drawn and his phone pressed to his ear. Report, he barked into the device. Maya couldn't hear the response, but she could see Vincent's face go pale in the dim kitchen light. How many? Another pause. Understood. Execute Protocol 7-inch. He hung up and turned to Maya, his expression grim. We need to move. Now. What's happening? The Columbos just hit 3 of my businesses across town. Simultaneous strikes. It's a distraction. Vincent was already gathering his tactical maps, his movements quick and efficient. The real target is here. As if summoned by his words, Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Papa? What's all the noise? Vincent's entire demeanor shifted instantly. The dangerous Mafia Don disappeared, replaced by a gentle father pulling his son into his arms. Just some grown-up business, Bambino. We're going to go for a drive with Maya. But even as he spoke soothingly to Tommy, Maya could see Vincent's men through the window, moving with military precision around her house. This wasn't a retreat, this was preparation for a siege. Vincent, Maya said quietly, nodding toward the window. He followed her gaze and cursed under his breath. They're already here. 3 black sedans had appeared at the end of her street, boxing in Vincent's SUVs. Maya could see figures moving in the shadows between houses, and a terrible realization hit her. The Columbos weren't planning to wait for tomorrow. They were making their move tonight. Take Tommy to the back bedroom, Vincent ordered, his voice once again cold and commanding. Lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear. What about you? Vincent checked his weapon one final time, and Maya saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, not the calculating patience of a crime boss, but the desperate fury of a father pushed beyond his breaking point. I'm going to end this. The first gunshot shattered her living room window. Maya screamed, grabbing Tommy and running for the back of the house as Vincent's voice roared orders into his radio. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from her quiet street, turning her suburban sanctuary into a war zone. As she huddled in the bedroom with Tommy pressed against her chest, Maya realized with crystal clarity that there would be no going back to her old life. The woman who had opened her door to strangers in a storm was gone forever. What remained was someone harder, someone who would do whatever it took to protect the child in her arms and the man fighting a war in her living room. The breaking point had arrived, and Maya discovered she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. The gunfire lasted exactly 17 minutes. Maya knew because she'd counted every second, holding Tommy against her chest as he sobbed into her shoulder, his small body shaking with each explosion of sound from the street outside. Then, suddenly, silence. Papa? Tommy whispered, his voice hoarse from crying. Maya strained to listen, her heart hammering so loud she was sure the entire neighborhood could hear it. Footsteps moved through her house, heavy, deliberate, getting closer. The bedroom door handle turned. Maya grabbed the scissors from her nightstand, positioning herself between Tommy and whoever was coming through that door. She might be just a kindergarten teacher, but she would fight with everything she had. The door opened slowly, and Vincent stepped inside. He was alive, but barely. Blood soaked through his black sweater from a wound in his shoulder, and his face was pale with exhaustion and pain. But his eyes burned with the fierce satisfaction of a man who had won against impossible odds. Papa! Tommy launched himself into Vincent's arms, not caring about the blood or the smell of gunpowder that clung to his father like cologne. I'm here, Bambino. Papa's here. Vincent's voice cracked as he held his son, and Maya saw tears he didn't bother to hide sliding down his face. It's over. We're safe. But Maya could see it wasn't over. Not really. Through the shattered bedroom window, she watched Vincent's soldiers moving efficiently through the street, cleaning up evidence and removing bodies. Her quiet neighborhood had become a crime scene, and she was at the center of it all. How many? She asked quietly. Vincent understood her question. 8 Columbos. 2 of mine. His jaw tightened. Someone told them exactly when to strike. Someone who knew our protocols. The betrayal you mentioned. Salvatore Torino. My lieutenant for 6 years. Vincent's voice was bitter. The Columbos offered him a better deal. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the broken window. If Vincent's own men could turn against him, how safe were any of them really? As if reading her thoughts, Vincent set Tommy down gently and moved to the window, scanning the street below with the paranoid eyes of a man who had just learned he couldn't trust his own shadow. We can't stay here, he said. This house is compromised. Too many sight lines, too many ways in. Where will we go? Maya asked, and was startled to realize she'd said we without thinking. Vincent turned to look at her, and something shifted in his expression. We? Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just meant. Tommy will need you, Vincent said quietly. And so will I. The admission hung between them like a bridge either was sure they wanted to cross. But before Maya could respond, Tommy tugged on her pajama pants. Maya, look! She followed his pointing finger to the window and gasped. Vincent's soldiers were setting up a perimeter that extended far beyond her house. They were securing the entire block. Mrs. Henderson's house, the Johnsons' place where the kids rode bikes, even the small park at the end of the street. Vincent, what are they doing? Making sure this never happens again. He moved closer to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body despite his injury. Maya, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight? It changed everything. How? Vincent was quiet for a long moment, watching his son play with the broken pieces of her lamp as if they were the most fascinating toys in the world. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but absolutely certain. You didn't run. When the shooting started, when Tommy was scared and I was bleeding and everything was chaos, you didn't run. You stayed. You protected him. Maya thought about that moment when she grabbed the scissors, ready to fight anyone who tried to hurt the little boy in her arms. Of course I did. He's just a child. No, Vincent said, turning to face her fully. He's my child. And you protected him like he was yours. That makes you... What? Vincent reached out, his fingers barely brushing against her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, completely at odds with the violence that had just consumed her living room. Family, he said simply. Real family. The kind that's chosen, not just blood. Through the window, Maya watched the sun rise over her transformed street. The black SUVs were still there, but now they felt different, not like prison bars, but like fortress walls. Protecting something precious. Tommy had curled up on her bed, exhausted from the night's terror, his small hands still clutching the edge of Maya's pajama shirt like an anchor. Vincent sat beside him, his large hands smoothing his son's dark hair with infinite tenderness. So what happens now? Maya asked. Vincent looked at her over Tommy's sleeping form, and Maya saw her future written in his storm-gray eyes. Not the simple life she'd planned, but something far more dangerous and infinitely more meaningful. No, he said. We build something worth protecting. Outside, his empire stood guard, but inside Maya's bedroom, a different kind of family was being born, forged in gunfire and sealed with a love that would be unbreakable. The storm had passed, but what remained was stronger than anything that had come before.